Hi, we're going to talk about neutralization reactions in this section. If you've ever had an upset stomach, it's because you have a lot of acid in your stomach, and antacids can help you by neutralizing that too much excess stomach acid. So what are the products of the reaction of an acid with a base? This is something we have to know. So take this into account. When we have an acid and base, we make water, and we make a salt, something called a salt. It's not like necessarily table salt, like the sodium chloride, but that could be one. It's just like in general this compound called a salt. So for example, if you have hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide and they neutralize each other, they do make sodium chloride, which is table salt, and water. But sulfuric acid and potassium hydroxide would make potassium sulfate and water. So this is called a salt right here. This is a salt, even though we just call this salt ourselves. Excuse me. And this is table salt. Any one of these ionic compounds is called a salt. So an acid and base react in an aqueous solution, that means it's in water, producing salt and water. That's called a neutralization reaction. So here's some salts and what we can use them for. So there's a lot of different salts. These are all ionic compounds. So we're going to do a lab. I'm not sure if we'll do it virtually or if we'll do it in person, but we'll do a titration because this is an important skill we need to learn in chemistry. And when we add an acid and base, we're going to get to an endpoint. So when you add a known amount of a solution that you know the concentration of, and then you compare it to another solution that you don't know the concentration of, that's called titration. The end point of that titration is going to be neutralization, where you've had a chemical reaction with all the acid and base in that solution. When acid and bases are mixed, the equivalence point is when the moles of hydrogen equals the moles of hydroxide ion. So all the moles are equal to each other. All the H pluses are used up by the hydroxides. So finding the number of moles of an acid is called neutralization. So what if we had 0.5 moles of sodium hydroxide? How many moles of sulfuric acid are needed? So we have a half a mole. We have to have a balanced neutralization reaction shown. And for every 1 mole of sulfuric acid, we need 2 moles of sodium hydroxide. So the ratio is 1 to 2. And so if I start with my given, and I know this ratio, I can figure out how many moles of H2SO4 are going to be used up. Here's another one for you to try. You'll have to have a balanced equation first and then go through that process that we just did. When we know the concentration of a solution, it's called a standard solution. And we use indicators to figure out if we've neutralized an acid with a base. The point when that indicator changes color is called the endpoint, and we want to match the endpoint with that neutralization point. So we want to choose the right indicator to do that. So here's our acid solution. The indicator is clear at this point. Phenolphthalein is clear in sorry, this is probably a different indicator. There's an indicator in here that we can't see. We're adding a base to with this burette right here. So we're doing an acid-base reaction. And when the color changes permanently, then we have neutralization. So, for example, when you do your vinegar titration lab, you're going to have vinegar here. You're going to have sodium hydroxide that we know the concentration of here. We're going to have an indicator in this acid solution. And when we get to where the acid equals the base, the moles of acid equal the number of base in this flask, then we will have neutralization and the color will change permanently. So this is what we're going to see when we either do that lab virtually or in class. So if we could graph that, excuse me, allergies are kicking in today. When we have, this is how much sodium hydroxide we're adding from our burette right there. And we have our acid in here. When we look at this pH changes with the pH meter, we can see that when this happens on the graph, we are at the equivalence point. We have acid, the number of acid moles is equaling the number of base moles that we've added here with the burette. Acids here, bases there. So how can we figure out concentration of an unknown sulfuric acid solution? We have a known concentration and a known volume of a standard sodium hydroxide solution. We know the volume of this sulfuric acid. We're trying to find the concentration. So these are our givens. We have the concentration, we have the volume of acid, we have the volume of the base. We have to have a balanced reaction before we can start. So this is our steps. We're going to start with the liters of sodium hydroxide we used, change that to moles, compare that to moles of sulfuric acid that we would need, and then figure out the molarity. So we start with the liters we used of sodium hydroxide. We had 18 milliliters. We change it to liters. We know the molarity, so that's going to give us moles of sodium hydroxide. Then in a balanced equation, we know it's a ratio of 1 to 2. And then we're going to figure out the moles of the sulfuric acid that we used. And then we have to divide by the liters of sulfuric acid that we used. We used 25 milliliters, which is 0.025 liters, and that will give us molarity. This is a really good problem to understand and know how to do, because this could be, you could see this on a quiz or a test. So make sure you can understand how we step through this problem. Here's another one to try on your own. And let's try the quiz. So when neutralization takes place, one of the products is always, so this is something we have to memorize, this neutralization reaction. So we're always going to make a salt. So pause me and try to figure out this answer to this and see if you can do it correctly. And the answer is going to be that one. And now here's another one where you should pause me and see if you can figure out this one yourself. Do a balanced equation first and then see if you can figure out the math. That's the answer. And here's one more that you should pause me on and see if you can figure out the answer. Alright, so this is a really good section to know how to do math for, because this will be showing up all over the place in quizzes and tests. So make sure you understand this. Alright, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.